Have you brought any fruits or vegetables onto the planet?
2 weeks.
Excuse me?
Good morning, afternoon, and evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Genisaurus, and this is a dev diary for the month of March. I say that like these are supposed to be monthly things, and that's never really been the case. I would like to see them done more often, and I will personally be putting in an effort to try and reach this goal. I'm doing that because one of the biggest demands from the community has been more transparency in just about everything that we do, and I can agree wholeheartedly with that. While there's some things that I can't personally guarantee more transparency on, this is one of them. For my part, I've tried to involve the community in the big projects that I've been working on since the last letter, namely the armor set redesigns and the new loot system, though there's not much feedback you could really give on the last one. I can say that your feedback on the armor sets, though, was incredibly important to me, and trust me, I listened to all of it. I would pretty much daily make a big pot of tea, take 3 Advil, and go through every comment and PM that I got. Which brings me to my next point. The Return of Reckoning staff has always tried to involve the community in the game's direction to a significant degree, whether it's by openly asking for that direction or by adjusting our implementations due to feedback that we get. Sometimes we make more people happy, sometimes we piss them off more. But for that interaction to happen at all, and for our processes to make the most people happy, we need to hear from you. If you're taking the time to listen to this, please also take the time to pop on over to the forums every now and then, or join the IRC channel, or even just send us an email. If there's something in particular you'd like to see from us, or that you would like to see in-game, post it as a reply to the news post in the forums, but that's enough proselytizing for now. Starting with this dev diary, I will be trying to run a monthly Q&A segment. I've collected some questions over IRC, some over PM, and even some over my email. If you would like your question to be answered in next month's segment, either send me a PM or send an email to genisaurus@gmail.com. But this month, we'll be starting with a question from T-Spray, who asks, when will the level cap be raised? So this one is a quick and easy question. We're not going to do any more increases to the level cap until Tier 4 is ready. When we do that, the cap will be raised directly to 40. I'm not personally sure at this time if the renown rank cap will be increased. Annihilator will be out, and that has a renown rank requirement of 35 or 36. So you would be able to use any gear that we introduce. We might increase the renown rank cap to 45, just to have some extra purple numbers for you guys to work for, but we'll see. Aid asks, do the developers intend to stick to the game's original philosophy, and Mark Jacobs' philosophy, that ORVR should always provide the most rewards out of anything else within the game? Aid also continues, this is also a factor for the later development of Tier 4, where the best-in-slot weapons were only available from scenarios. Do you intend to add rewards of equal caliber to ORVR? So, sticking to the game's philosophy is kind of difficult when the game changed so much over its lifetime. It's a question of where do we draw the line between what we want to restore from Live and what we want to improve going forward. One of the things I've said a couple times on the forums, is that our goal is not to rebuild Warhammer Online. Our goal is to build the game that Warhammer Online could have and should have been, within the constraints of what we have to work with. Sometimes that's really easy, like saying we're not going to have Doomflayer, Warpforged, or Renown Rank 100. Sometimes that's harder to do, like when we're trying to understand how the resource carrier RVR system is the most favored by our community over any of the other systems. Maybe that's just because not enough people voted, or maybe that's just what people remember the best. If that is actually what most people favor, then I'll just have to eat it. But I have a hard time believing it, because I personally hated that system. But to each their own, and if that's what the most people want, then we'll try to incorporate that to some degree. But anyways, moving on. When we're talking about the difference between Warhammer Online's vision and our vision, I can't say that the staff really has a clear idea of how we would do that, where we're going to be going. Everybody on the staff has their own ideas, just like everybody on the forums has their own ideas of how the game should be run. There's a lot of internal discussion and a lot of compromising and debating that goes on for what direction we'll move in. Now, when it comes to gear, I can say with Tier 4, we will be approaching each new level of power as kind of a separate thing. I say we, mostly meaning I, because gear and items have kind of become my thing. For example, Annihilator will probably get a small rework, and there will probably, very likely, be a new scenario set to debut alongside of it. But, for example, we might not touch Conqueror, or implement a Renown rank 45 scenario set. When I say we might not touch Conqueror, I mean we might not change it from what it was. When we're talking about endgame best in slot gear, you kind of have to consider, or we have to consider, if the best approach is going to be to buff an underperforming item and risk some degree of power creep, or nerf the best in slot item and reduce the incentive to try and get it. Because one of the things that, I personally saw in live, I don't know if this was a conclusion anybody else got, but people almost never put in work for subpar gear. Look at PQs, for example. The only reason anybody ground out PQs was to get level 200 crafting containers. After a while, nobody really needed or wanted ruin gear. The weapons, even the purple gear that they dropped, couldn't compete with the purple gear you got from just about anything else. So nobody put in the time and effort to get them, unless they were just trying to complete something or look for an additional appearance. So one of the concerns that I would have is if we, let's say made weapons that you got from cities or even dungeons, let's say, would you see fewer people playing scenarios? Now, I know scenarios are going to be one of those things that everybody always plays just because of the style of game. But for scenarios to work, for a random matchmaking system to work, they really need more people doing them. And if fewer people are going to be queuing for scenarios because the rewards aren't as good as a different kind of gameplay, it hurts everybody in the end. So next, Navis asks, I was wondering about the broken keep map icons, war report, rally call, and keep siege stuff such as claiming, and hints on RVR improvements such as VP bars. So there's a lot to address here. First, I don't know if we've looked into what occasionally prevents map icons for keeps from changing color once they've been captured. It's a visual bug though, so it's low priority. As for the rally call and war report, we don't really have much planned for those at the moment. But I don't really remember what purpose they served that you can't do by just asking in tier chat or by opening up the warband window and looking at what zones a warband is in. For victory point bars, the community might question whether or not bringing VPs back at all would be an improvement. But if they are ever brought back, or if they're never brought back, I should say, we could repurpose those bars for something else. I don't know what, but we could probably do something cool with them. Keep claiming is going to be a difficult task. So usually we have sniffed packets from live, and we can use those to intuit how features were handled by the old servers, and we can mimic that behavior. Unfortunately, the last that I heard on the issue, maybe that's changed or maybe I'm wrong, but we have 0 packets for keep claiming. So of all of the people who were running the packet sniffing tool for us when Warhammer Online was still alive, not a single person claimed a keep. So we have no idea what the packets for those look like. We have no idea how to mimic the behavior to generate those packets. Or even what the client would accept or deal with. So it's not an impossible task. It's big on our list of things that we want to bring back eventually, but it's going to take quite a bit more effort than other things. So while it would be incredibly key to the RVR experience, it might be something that's delayed just out of necessity. Warhammer 1995 asks, what is the future of the ORVR system? Is there any chance to bring back PQ stage NPC movements? Which I'm assuming he's referring to NPC scripting during different stages of a PQ. I can say, while we're probably not going to touch the RVR system as a whole, the design, probably until fortresses are done. Fortresses act as kind of a capstone or a functional end game to the Tier 4 RVR system, at least until city sieges are developed. We don't really have too many plans. We have lots of little ideas, but we don't have any grand plan as to where that'll go. I'm not sure how many people remember back when we were still in Tier 2, and we tried for a while to find an RVR system that worked for everybody. Worked for European players, worked for North American players, worked for Order, worked for Destro, worked for Pug warbands, worked for pre-made 6-man parties. We tried to find a system that prevented the worst kind of behavior from being implicitly encouraged. We failed pretty hard at that. We didn't have the tools to handle it at the time, so we settled on the system that we're using today, kind of as a holding pattern while we fixed more important things like Tier 3. But lately we've been putting in a lot of work. I should say Nalgol and Londo specifically have been putting in a lot of work to get siege weapons working. Azza has got a debolster system working now, and with that coming to life, we're getting to the point where we can do something really cool with the RVR campaign as a whole. So for PQ scripting, that's something we are going to need to do someday. I mean, in general, we just need the ability to script NPCs, but that's going to take a lot of work for content that historically is unappreciated and underused. So, like I said, we'll need to do it for NPCs in general. But we could do some cooler things with public quests, changing the way that they work completely or the way that they influence the game, instead of just spending hundreds of man hours rebuilding them so that people can go right back to ignoring them like they did on live. Personally, I love public quests, but they're one of those things that Warhammer objectively got really, really right. And every MMO since Warhammer Online has done them better. They've taken the idea and they've improved on it some way. Guild Wars 2 did it better. Even SWTOR had probably what is essentially the same thing with area quests. Elder Scrolls Online, I believe, had a similar system. So Final Fantasy XIV has a fate system that works really well. They're all taking the same idea, but they make it a little bit more exciting and they make it a little bit more rewarding than public quests ever were in Warhammer. I'd like to see something cooler done with them. Anyways, when it comes to NPC scripting, it's something we'll need to do, but when it comes to applying that scripting towards public quests, we'll see we'll see if we can't find something better to spend that effort on than to just repair them. Idrinth asks a number of questions. I'll start with the first one. What is the intended power difference in a tier? So that one's I'm going to take the easy, lazy answer to that. I'm going to say whatever they were on live and a little bit lower in Tier 4. Frankly, there's no good way to measure this. I mean, do you tell the power difference between time to kill, total stats from equipment? I don't know. I'm sure there is a way. I'm sure somebody will come out and say, well, this is how you measure power difference. Provide some nice mathematical equations and proof, and I will be totally wrong. But I do have to ask, does the power difference really matter in tiers 1 through 3? Was the power difference on live, when each tier was about a 10 level difference and only a single set really for that tier, was that a significant power difference when people are just kind of moving right on through? And how is that going to change now that we have the debolster system that allows people to just go back? You know, does that mean that the power difference is going to be more important? Doesn't mean that it's going to be less important because more people will be at the higher level of power. I don't know. The next question is, would it be possible to group scenarios by the tactics available? So you'd have a bracket for levels 0 through 9, a bracket for 10 through 19, 20 through 29, 30 through 39, and 40 in order to reduce the possible power gap. So I'd say this is kind of begging the assumption that an extra tactic slot contributes significantly to a power gap. For some classes, it definitely would, especially later in the game once you have better tactics available. In Tier 1, I would say it doesn't, because that first tactic is almost always crap, unless you're a greenskin. But in later tiers it might. I guess in the end, I don't have any immediate opinions for or against it, so I would farm it out to the community. If there were a poll saying that that's how scenario brackets should be divided up, we could definitely look at the results of that and think about breaking up scenario brackets like that. Question number 3 from Idrinth. Would it be possible to add a third set per tier for the third mastery path, so specializing in that is possible? I would say I would love to do that, because designing sets is the thing that I do, if it were possible. The problem is that it's not about the third mastery tree, it's about the third playstyle. Most classes don't really have 3 different playstyles defined for them. Some, like the engineer, definitely do. You have the long-range rifleman spec, which is relatively stationary. You have the medium-range, highly mobile spec for grenadier, or playstyle, I should say. And then you have a very close-range, more point defense, stationary build for Tinkerer, although engineers might not be terribly good at performing at least one of those 3 roles. At least they have those 3 different roles. But then you have for Swordmasters, for example. What does a Cane Swordmaster want that a Hoth Swordmaster doesn't? You know, for a tank, you're either going to be a defensive tank or you're going to be an offensive tank, and that you don't have to have a 2-hander for that. But if you were designing a set for an offensive tank, let's say wielding a 2-hander, I don't know what you would give them that you wouldn't also want on a sword and board offensive setup. I mean, maybe additional block, but parry would do just as well. You know? And if it's offensive, you would probably just put melee crit on instead of either. And that's going to be just as useful. So you still come down to an offensive or defensive setup. The other problem is that, especially in Tier 4, there are dungeon sets which are just as good as the PvP sets. And I generally have a policy of not touching those. I don't want to really change around the rewards for doing dungeons at this time. That might change in the future. But then you also have to design a third or even a 4th set that's not only serves a different role, but it also has different stats and itemization between your RVR set, your scenario set, and your dungeon set. So last question from Idrinth is, can we get the gear vendors labeled and organized in a less time-consuming way? I know that this is an idea that you've been pushing on the forums. I personally have no comment. I guess I'd want to see evidence that the current vendors are who actually are confusing or time-consuming in a way that couldn't just be fixed by giving them more accurate titles. I mean, the vendors are divided up by level, so if you had a title on the vendor that clearly said Tier 1 Renowned Merchant, Tier 2 Renowned Merchant, Tier 3, I think that would probably clear up any confusion. between which one you should be shopping at for what gear. But yeah, I don't know. I guess that one I would farm that to the community as well. Put out a poll or something, and we'll see how the community as a whole feels about it. Last but not least, SacRX asks, when is Tier 4 coming? Well, I know you want me to say it. One of the biggest reasons why I wanted to hold this developer diary is to announce that we are officially working on Tier 4. We are all pretty much picking up tasks to get that done, and we are driving that effort. So because we're all volunteers, I'm not really going to give out any deadlines. I'm not going to say it's going to be out in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
A guess, I would say within the next month, but that's not a promise. So with that, I want to just close with some updates on what each specific staff member is doing and what they're working on in order to get Tier 4 done. So we'll start with Azariel. He has been working a lot on improving the performance of the game, closing down memory leaks, fixing little bugs related to performance, and that's pretty much what he's going to be working on for the next 2 weeks. We expect with Tier 4, we're going to get a large influx of players, people coming back who have just been waiting for the Tier 4 campaign to be done before they come back and join us. We're also going to have a lot more load on the game in general, and that's going to need to be handled. Of course, he's also going to take some time to get more item procs working, because those are critical for Tier 4 gear in order to make different items competitive. And he's also got to assign some abilities to oil and rams, because siege equipment is going to be one of those things that we must have working before Tier 4 is done. We will not release the Tier 4 campaign until we have siege weapons working in some capacity, but we are very close to that. Londo, unfortunately, won't be able to work on anything until next month, but when he does come back, he has said the first thing he wants to finish is an updated launcher, which will finally let us start pushing new content to the client, which would let us do so many new things. Then he's going to work on the instance engine. So I know previously a lot of people thought that Tier 4 wasn't going to really be done until we got instances working, but our priorities have shifted a little bit. So those will be coming after, probably after the Tier 4 launch. Nalgal has been getting a lot of work done on PQs and getting keep loot rolls working. You have him to thank for that. So there's still a little bit more work to be done on siege weapons at this time. But for him, all of his time is going to be spent on siege weapons all the time. And then probably a little bit more work on keep loot rolls. You know, there's a contribution system we need to get worked out. Right now it's entirely random. Evil Door and Sturkar have been working together to do a complete overhaul of the renowned vendor gear. Those green items you buy with gold to hold you over until you get something better. So a lot of those had some useless stats on them for classes. Willpower on tanks, weapon skill on healers, blah, 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 blah. Evil Door has finished his design, and I can say that as of today, Sturkar has completely finished redesigning all of the items for all tiers 1 through 4. So that is over 2,000. I think it's something like 2,300 items that he has had to manually add to the database. So that's fantastic work. And you guys can look forward to, when Tier 4 launches, having green gear that helps close that gear gap a little bit more. Marilors has been hard at work adding keep guards and keep foremen to every keep. So as we get siege weapons working, at least initially you will buy them from the keep foreman, like you did at some point on live. And all of the keeps are now populated with guards and lords, so they are pretty much ready to go. He will also be working on fixing zone areas, map unlocks, influence, and respawn locations. So a lot of work for him coming up. Torque and Ryan Makara have both been hard at work fixing a ton of bugs. They've also been hunting down appearances for different Tier 4 scenario sets. Torque will also be working on the Tier 4 epic quests soon, so that's going to be some long, fun work for him. Ramadan, Abix, and Linuxman, our newest members to the development team, have been spending quite a bit of time fixing bugs and adding more data to the PQs that we have. So fixing different PQ stages, getting their keep chests to spawn in the right place, a lot of work there. But these guys are providing the backbones for those PQs and at least getting to them to the point where you can participate in them and get something valuable out of them. So those guys are going to continue doing that work. For myself, I'm doing a gear redesign for the Tier 4 sets, particularly Annihilator and a new scenario set. If I get the chance, I will also be working on a much needed expansion to quest handlers to account for some more complex objectives. So that's it for this developer diary. Thank you very much for listening, watching, and if you have any questions that you would like answered for the next developer diary, please send me a PM on the forums or shoot me an email at genisaurus@gmail.com. If you have any comments or any questions about this particular developer diary, please post them in the comments on the forums, and we'll get to them. Thank you very much, everyone, and have fun playing.